Welcome to the Huffing Spirit podcast, where we take you from the sacred to the profane, from the serious to the silly, from the outer to the inner, and from the guru back to you. Join your playful podcast guides, Alex Hindley and Natalie Dick, as they bring you back to a grounded and more authentic approach to spirituality.
We are recording our first ever podcast of Huffing Spirit. Woo!
Huffing Spirit, episode 1, take 3.
Alex and Natalie are, what are we engaging in, Alex?
Excellent question. What won't we engage in? Today is going to be very limited, but we're going to cover everything, but we're going to give people bite-sized chunks to get back into spirituality.
Yes, I love
every
it.
day.
And really bringing the spiritual experience, which is quite vast and out there. And for me, what's really important is just kind of honing it in, bringing it back to simple steps that allow us to kind of come into our human experience a little bit more grounded in that way. For me, that's super important.
Yeah, same. Making it as practical as possible, especially in today's day and age. It's so easy to get lost in the 45-minute meditation sessions, crystals, astrology. There's a little place, there's a home for all of that. We're going to explore it. But I'm really excited too, because I think it can be a little bit overwhelming. And there's so much wonderful power here that can really change lives.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, again, just driving home like those simple steps, because sometimes when you go real far into those outer realms, which I love going out into those outer realms, and people get kind of lost in different dimensional fields and thinking and experiencing. And I think from our perspective, all of that stuff is really, really cool and really awesome, but let's bring it back. Let's bring it back on the ground. And I mean, bringing it back to the name of Huffing Spirit, it's like, everybody's out there getting high on spirit.
Getting high on this thing that's like outside of themselves.
Yes. Yeah. Outside of themselves, really just trying to find something that really isn't in line with the authenticity of them as the soul I am expressed. Right. And that's kind of what I like to bring it back into, like everybody's natural state of authenticity.
Less woo, more you.
Yeah. And we're both pretty funny, so we draw out some F-bombs.
We think we're funny. We're gonna fucking test this out.
I know, people may be like, these two are doozies.
They're laughing at each other's jokes.
Yeah, we'll have a podcast that nobody listens to, and it's just us like laughing at each other. I'm down for that.
Our significant others are like, what are you doing? It's like, I'm recording. They're like, you have no followers. Who are you doing this for?
What do you guys do this weekend? Recording. So where do we want to start with today? What is this podcast? Who's it for? What are you going to learn? Do we want to go there?
Yeah, that's a great way. What is this podcast? This podcast is the coming together of you and I. We both met in a class that we met from one of our teachers, Kurt, and it was a 3-year journey inward to essentially learn how you can begin to start healing yourself. Within that class, you and I began kind of talking about, I think the words were the douchebaggery within the spiritual game. Yeah. That it's just so, I love that it's out there more. I love that we're having more of these conversations. You're seeing it more in programs where we're like talking about the multiverse. You're talking about spirituality. You're talking about astral bodies. But it can be a little much. And I don't know if the guides along the way where we are spiritually are as responsible as they are or could be at times. So I think for me, this is like, how do we give people some practical sound guidance that they can test to see what resonates within themselves and empower them to go out and make better decisions as they're on this fun, weird path.
Yeah, and I like that because I think there are a lot of people who are, I guess, starting their awakening journey. And this whole, I like to call it templated spirituality, where it's very, I would call it spiritual materialism too, where you have to do this ritual, you have to do all of these things to be considered quote unquote a spiritual person. So for the average person who is really starting this awakening journey or kind of leaning into soul, spirit, like that is incredibly overwhelming and intimidating to think, oh, well, I don't have this stuff. I don't even meditate, or I don't do that. Like all of these kind of practices, which are beautiful. Some of them are really beautiful, like, oh, I don't do cacao ceremonies, therefore I am not a spiritual person. So I can't feel my heart if I don't do a cacao ceremony.
I didn't know there was a sacred way to ingest chocolate.
Yeah, I mean,
What kind of chocolate have I been taking?
don't get me wrong, I'm going to put my hand up. I love cacao ceremonies and I do them at home myself, but it's not a requirement to do that in order to be a spiritual person, right? And I think along the path of spirituality, I think people get really lost in these rituals that it's like, well, if I do this, that means this. No, it doesn't, but they're nice. You know what I mean? So I think what I would love, and both you and I would love to see, this podcast is offering people kind of like, you can dip your toes in the spiritual world, but also be really grounded in your human experience. And like, what little tidbits of information are you going to learn on this journey? And that's what Alex and I are, what I hope and what you hope to kind of offer in this podcast.
So you're talking about the tidbits that we hope to offer on the journey. Somebody listening to this for the first time, what do you think we can begin to tell them that they can expect? Like for me, I come from a plant medicine background, which is how I met people that eventually introduced me to the same person to introduce you, that I met you. So with that, like there was a lot of talk of doing ayahuasca and ceremonial plant medicine. I think I can offer like a good little guide on that. I helped essentially cultivate half the community in Chicago for the particular teacher that we had. So there's a bit of a process there of walking people through that. So it's letting them know what to expect, what's okay, what's not okay for themselves, for others. I know that I can do that. I can do other things, but for those that are interested in that, that's something that I can speak to,
For me, I think, in my practice, what I teach is embodiment, and we can all seek out knowledge, right? We can all seek out knowledge and read things, again, outside of ourselves, but it's embodying that knowledge through the body, that's where wisdom comes from. So for me, spiritual practices are amazing, but I want to teach people to walk the walk, not talk it, walk it. Right? For me, that's really important in the spiritual world. It can be so out there, but again, teaching people that everything is actually in this current experience in your body. And a lot of that information is held within. How do we get it? Right. And for me, that's what I teach in my practice and in the healing sessions. But I want to bring a lot of that to this podcast. I think both of us have such a interesting background. Should we dive into that?
I don't think we've teased it out enough of like all the cool stuff we can offer. And it's not saying like, oh, we're going to do this, for sure.
Yeah.
But I mean, the big thing you were talking about in body work. And like for me, when I'm talking to anybody, a friend, family member, or somebody that needs help, it's how do I get them to see the answers within versus going outside? And for me, that is a big part of my why we're doing this is the whole model of society for thousands of years has been placed on something outside of ourselves. Mm-hmm. We are psychologically, environmentally conditioned to be reaching for something outside. And the second we start going inward, we actually start doing the work. Mm-hmm. With that, my own journey is also how do I learn to embody the idea of mind, body, spirit being distinguished, not separate. And that's part of that dichotomization of something outside of ourselves, something separate. how do we change that frame? So it's something that I can accept and understand, and yet I'm still working on that embodiment practice as well.
And I love that you said that you're still working, because this podcast isn't about us being gurus. Like,
No.
days of the guru is dead. It's over, right? So, we are teachers, guides, but we're also students. We're students of life, and
Crash test dummies on a spiritual path.
We want to go through this with you, but we also go.
So real quick to that, when we say go in it with you, if and when we have a guest on, the guest is going to have a format where we're going to say, what's something that you can give our listeners 5 minutes every day that they can work on and practice and embody? Natalie and I are going to be doing that. So in between episodes, you're going to hear us talking about this stuff. And then the next episode's going to start. We're going to be talking about the stuff we're doing. It's not just so-and-so's on here. Check out their book. That's great. We're learning. We're going to be building a community, and we're going to be discovering together, all of us.
Yeah, I love that. And that's something that, when you meet a healer or when you're working with a guide or somebody, you don't want them to be above you. You want them to be on the same level with you. So we're, Alex and I are along this journey with you. We're students, but we hope and know that we'll offer, really good bite-sized tidbits of information that is going to be practical, but again, embodied for you.
High vibration and nutritionally dense.
Oh, yeah, I like that.
There you go.
So
maybe it'll help you poop better in the morning. I don't know.
A little bit. You'll have a good spiritual poop.
Purging takes a lot of different forms.
Yeah, all the layers. So should we introduce ourselves?
Sure. Natalie, who are you?
Who am I? Oh,
why the hell are you? Why should I even listen to you?
Why? Well, I'm pretty funny, I think. But let's see. Who is Natalie? I guess, should I go back in my history? What is my ego presenting and what I want people to hear of me? Or
you know what? I love that take too. Hey, here's who I am. Here's who I think I am. Here's what my persona wants you to know.
Okay, here's my egoic explanation. So I guess I could call myself a self-healing initiator. I've had a practice in holistic health as a practitioner for about almost 10 years now. And I've been guiding people really back to helping them heal themselves. So that is my, healer persona. I'm also a mom, and to a little almost 5-year-old. His name's George, and he's the little love of my life. I guess I would consider myself a creative soul. I play music, and I love dancing. If you put me in a room with people, I'm going to elevate it. I love being around people. I love connecting, and I would say I'm pretty gregarious. I think that's a really good word to describe me. And yeah, I'm super excited to do this podcast with you, Alex, because I know we have really good energetic synergy. We're both fire signs. I'm a Sagittarius. You're a Leo, and we're going to create some.
I'm a Leo, and I don't know anything about anybody else. That sums it up pretty well.
You're I'm a Leo, and it's fire. That's it. That's all I know. Okay, so Alex, let's hear about you. What's your egoic?
There's so many things there that you said, which is probably why we resonate so well together. I view myself as very creative as well. I have a lot of ideas, but my hand is never caught up to my mind. So I'll have an idea for a comic book or a podcast or this or that. I'm always coming up with ideas for that.
And sending me hilarious texts about it.
Yeah, I'll just call it as probably barely any follow through. So this is why I'm very glad to be a part of this podcast, because I have somebody to be accountable to, and I'll work much harder for you than I work for myself. I love to laugh. I come from a very big family, a lot of different personalities within my family, but I've always been fascinated with spirituality, thanks to my grandfather, who went on his own spiritual walkabout, and the way that he internalized or perceived his father's passing was completely different for him, and it led him on his spiritual path, which gave me a lot of cool things as a kid to grow up hearing about Buddhism and Confucianism and Taoism. So I think I'm very aligned to Eastern philosophy. I tend to study that a lot. Taoism is the yin yang is the AC/DC current of the universe for me, as far as I look at it. Conscious and unconscious, male and female. I am an eternal student. I just finished this healing course that Natalie and I were talking about, Advanced Psychosomatic Character Therapy, which was 3 years, wonderfully beautiful and intense. I'm a father, awesome 2.5-year-old named Jackson. I've got a wife named Biddy, and she puts up with me pretty well.
Biddy's amazing.
Yeah. Natalie and I are like the big ideas people, and then my wife is like the chief logistics officer. Like, okay, how does that get done before you go flying off in the atmosphere?
Is Biddy going to help us with our podcast?
Probably not. I don't.
Damn it.
I haven't asked her about that. I'm really motivated by helping to bring people back to themselves. I think one of my abilities is I can see the potential that people have, and I get tremendously excited bringing them to themselves. I'm very big in laughter. My spirit animal is a fucking party dragon, so that should tell you what's going on. And I'm sure we'll talk about it more. Maybe he might fucking come on. I don't know. I
think we should have an episode with just party dragon.
I think it can be arranged. So it's going to sound weird for people that don't know who I am and blah blah. I don't fully know how the parameters of how it works, right? So like.
What, party dragon or?
I can't get into it without medicine just yet.
Right. Oh.
But I'm told that I can get there through like eventually like breathing exercises and stuff like that. But I've yet to be able to access that. So to some, they would say like, oh, that's, if you're looking at a psychological lens, you'd say that's an alter ego. It could be archetypal flooding, another psychological term. It is very different for me. It's like being plugged into like I got a cord powering the Super Bowl.
A really beautiful, positive egregore, like something that's like kind of bringing in your energy.
Yeah. So and people that are there, they're like, it's like you look different, like your eyes change and your movement, and so.
Love it. I have never encountered party dragon, but
he's in your field, but you haven't, he hasn't doffed his cap to you yet.
Okay, amazing.
But I've had, we'll get into different experiences because I could fucking go on Party Dragon for a while. But I'm a person too, and Alex is doing this podcast. Party Dragon is a fucking possible guest. We'll see.
Should we have Party Dragon on as a possible guest? Like you're shifting kind of back and forth. That'd be like, or you're like interviewing yourself. That would be.
It would be like a horrible improv class. Where you see somebody says a joke and the one person's doing the voice and they have to go back and forth and.
Yeah, that would be a bit awkward. But maybe episode like 283.
We'll see. I'm not guaranteeing anything. Again, I don't fully understand the rules of how it works. But at one point, it went from like I would be on these plant medicine journeys and he would communicate to me like I was watching TV and everything would turn into like a fractal dragon. And it would be like, and I would see like skyscrapers like turning into dragons. And like all the little scales were like tiles. And I knew they were like little things internally processing for me. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. And then one day it was like, he went through the TV screen and was like, then just started introducing himself to everybody in the room.
Amazing. I need to meet Party Dragon. Speaking of meeting Party Dragon, one day Alex and I are going to be doing these podcast recordings in person. So Alex, you're in...
I am in Grand Rapids, Michigan, lovely Grand Rapids, from Ohio originally and then to Chicago, but I've lived around the world a few times between here and there. That's where Natalie and I met. We met in Chicago.
We met in Chicago, and currently I'm in London, Ontario, Canada. I just actually moved from Montreal a couple of weeks ago. And now I've like put my roots down in my hometown of London, Ontario. So Alex and I we're about a 4-hour drive from each other. But yeah, Alex.
It keeps getting longer every time we talk. It was 2.5 hours. Now you're like,
texted
3 hours. That's fine. 4.5 hours.
There's an hour and a half train, and you're like, no, there's not. I'm like, oh yeah, it's like 6 hours. Anyway, but
I didn't say no, there's not. I just didn't know. I'm not.
Neither did I. So Alex and I met when I was living in Chicago. Alice was living in Chicago, and we ventured together into the program Advanced Psychosomatic Character Therapy. And both of us have very different backgrounds, but kind of similar. You were in sales, corporate background. Myself,
Yep.
too. I was in the beauty industry and corporate sales many moons ago. And, meeting in this course was not only one of the most profound experiences for both of us, but it just really cracked us open to, the integrity in the healing world that is missing. So it's something that we hope to bring a lot of that back into this podcast, but also keeping it really fucking funny and light at the same time.
It's way too serious.
It's way too serious. And I mean, there's got to be integrity in the healing industry, but at the same time, Alex and I are just such like ridiculous firecrackers. So we're hoping to bring a lot of like levity to this, but also integrity.
Yes. And I mean, like, we're on the journey as well, too. So within our comfort zone, we're going to be opening up, being as vulnerable as we can be. It's a collective journey for all of us, so we are the crash test dummies. We're going along with everybody listening. We look forward to, learning more about ourselves and each other and the world around us, but the other people that are going to be coming on. The people that Natalie and I speak of collectively together are absolute amazing, high quality, integral people that are all truly invested in doing the work in love and bringing people back to themselves.
And the sacredness too, like really bringing people back to the sacredness of this industry, which has kind of gone out and lost that integrity. So anybody that we bring onto this podcast, it'll definitely be somebody working in integrity and in the sacredness of what this industry like kind of needs to come back to, right? And I find it so funny, Alex, you and I have only known each other for how long?
Jackson is 2.5, so maybe 3 years.
Yeah, 3 years. But I feel like we've known each other we've known each other from other lives. That is 100%. But yeah, I'm really excited to go on this podcast journey with you. Like
I'm honored to be on this journey with you as well, too.
We've been like jamming about this for so long, and now we're doing it. And I'm excited to see, what we put out and who we get to interview and bring in and, what comes of this.
And Natalie's one of my working partners in weirdness, where like I can just shoot her a text or leave her a voice message, and it's just like me spilling, rambling, talking about stuff. And I know that like she can accept my assholedness, my like shadow, my light.
Well, I can handle your offsidedness. I'm like, because Alex is probably one of the funniest guys that I've ever met, and like you can venture into the dark humor, which just saying hi to my neighbor, but you can venture into the dark humor, which I totally support.
Well, I come from a big family, right? And so we're kind of starting to understand it now that like we're all vying for our parents' attention in some ways, and we're all really trying to get like the next best joke on each other.
Yeah.
And it can be like crazy for our spouses. Like the first time my wife came in, she was, she's my girlfriend, but there's like 20 of us in a room and we're all talking over each other. And just like, and you're like, no, you're no, blah, blah, and like everybody understands what the other person is saying. And she's like, wow.
She's like, I can't handle this. Yeah. So where this podcast, we're not going to censor ourselves. We're going to keep it real. There's probably going to be maybe some dark humor thrown in there, offside stuff, but again, keeping it in the integrity of the healing industry.
Yeah, and our goal isn't to like make fun of somebody, take the bus over them, then back it up again. But like it's done out of fun, and I think, especially for me, healing is like one of the deepest. Laughter is one of the deepest forms of healing that you can do.
100%. I think like even in session with my clients, like sometimes we're in very traumatic scenarios, but it's not something where I throw in a joke at that moment, but there is a way to use humor to create levity in certain heavy situations. So Alex and I are definitely going to be doing that in a lot on this podcast, which I think is really important. Humor is, and laughter and the levity in this industry is so needed.
Yeah. And for me, it's very much like a Trojan horse. If I tell you right now, Natalie, you need to fix this. You need to get your shit. You're like, there's already a mental block with the energy where your mind's kind of like, hey, because the mind wants to protect itself.
Yeah,
And
well,
the mind,
that projection, right?
Totally. And especially when you start studying the ego, like the ego will do crazy things to keep its own view the same, right? So a joke is kind of like a non-threat to the ego. The joke just kind of slides in.
Yeah.
And the message is in there and it opens up. So the one person who will probably just name drop him a billion times anyways, Kurt, that's the way I experience him when I'm working with him, or when he's working with me, I should say. It's like, he uses these big words. My mind's trying to figure out what's going on. And then this like healing energy kind of comes through to heal. And like the words he's using are so high vibration, like your mind is semi-confused, but it's that space in between that he kind of jumps in there.
Yeah. He will definitely be a guest on our podcast. You will all meet and listen to Kurt at one point. He's, what a beautiful man.
To say the least. I mean, he's
to say the least, like one of the most beautiful people that you will ever encounter.
Always doing the work, always expanding. And he's so honest and true in what he does that everything is scientifically based as well. Because if it's not, right, it's just woo-woo. You're like, oh, we like these crystals, and we do these crystals. Like, there is an energetic effect that can be measured by crystals, by sound, by smoke, by whatever. And there is a great science behind it. It just hasn't been documented. Like most modern things, if it really changes science, it takes probably 20, 30 years for people to hear about it.
Yeah, 100%. So we have some really exciting stuff to explore in this podcast. Is there?
And, once that stuff gets open, we'll field stuff from people as well, too, with as much knowledge as we can bring to it, or the people that we know to talk about something. So it's not just like, here's what the only thing that we think is interesting.
Yeah, exactly. We're always open to suggestions. So,
well, I think we've covered who we are, our quick little intros, our whys. Did we do our collective why yet? Did we do that, or are we just kind of teasing that out?
Yeah, why don't we tease it out right now?
Okay.
You guys can all be a part of the journey of the creation of this podcast, because it's still in formation.
It's our third time recording it. We are super passionate about it. Very, very slightly nervous. Just, like you're trying to gather all your thoughts and you're trying to be like, oh, I do have stuff to say, but I have so much time to do it, to be concise, to get attention.
We're kind of letting that go. We're throwing all that out the window. We're just like, let's just do this. So you're kind of along the journey in this episode, and probably in the next couple, of creating this podcast. And that's like, I don't want to wait till everything's perfect, because that's just
not life.
Boring, right?
Yeah. So for me, my why is really, I'm fascinated with spirituality. Like, I could talk about it all day. It's super interesting to me. And especially like as you start to study spirit being the aspect of like, we are all elements of spirit unfolding for it to learn itself. I can grasp that conceptually. There's a lot that we're going to be talking about that like I'm grasping conceptually, but I'm still working to integrate it into my I am. I'm so fascinated by it. And when I'm in the space, I feel profoundly honored to be a part of it. I know that I have something to contribute to it. I've also been around the block enough to see the stuff that I really enjoy. I see some stuff that I think is doing more harm than good, and I wonder where that's coming from. So for me, as me being a student, I want to teach people how to be better students and how to look for great teachers, how to get good stuff that resonates with them, how to do the work so they know that they're not projecting on something else. Like, I think I want this, right? When you boil most stuff down, it's really like, I think I want that.
Yeah, and that intention most often is coming from an outside desire.
Yes.
Desire outside of yourself to to please, to be something that's entirely not in line with who you are, right? So I think for me, my mission is really to continuously on a level for my own growth is to constantly remove that which is in the way of myself being the I am fully expressed. And that's the journey that I take my clients on. And that's what I want you to find in this podcast is that you have a place where you can connect to the self, right? And start to really understand that everything outside of you is not really always in your best interest. And just driving people back to themselves. I think that's like my greater mission. Yeah.
Yeah.
In kind of like the most simplest way, it's, I'm committed to constantly coming back to myself because we are always, you have to catch yourself. It's really tricky out there. Every day, every single decision you make, every single day, it's like you make that decision. Is it based on me or is it based on some type of parental programming
or is it based out of fear? Is it based out of love? Is it conscious or unconscious?
Is it coming from love? So like every single moment we're making these little decisions. And so like my commitment is always like coming back to myself, like paying close attention to my body because my body is always talking to me. And that's like that intuition and how it speaks through me is going to be very different for somebody else. And helping people navigate, what does that feel like? What does that look like? That's my mission. So are we going to do this in the podcast? Hells yeah.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. It's so wonderful and beautiful. It's overly complicated, and yet it can be complex because, a lot of the stuff we're talking about is subtle. We're talking about subtle energy, right? I practice Aikido, which is where there is a lot of subtle movements going on. It's not a lot of gross stuff, but as somebody's grabbing you, you're changing your wrist, which changes the way that their arm has to grab you to facilitate that. And it could be something like micro that you don't realize. So we are talking about complex stuff in some ways. So we're trying our best to simplify it, but it's mind, body, spirit. It's all of this stuff and how it's connected to make who you are, where you are. Life is, it's super cool when you realize like it's all unfolding for you.
Yeah. And I think I love that you said that, like mind, body, spirit is not separate, but distinguished. And it's really kind of, can you be in connection to all those pieces of yourself? Like they're all kind of unfolding at the same time and having kind of one foot on this, in this physical reality, but also be connected to the mystery of who you are. That's beautiful. Can you imagine if you knew everything? Boring. Like you have to have 2 feet on the ground, but also be connected to the unknown, the mystery. And that, like, oh, it's so, I don't know, I get goosebumps when I think about that. So I want to
So I think for us, how do we provide like a life raft or a little flotation device as you're hanging out in these unknown waters we're going into? And especially with what's going on collectively in the planet, there's so much shadow stuff that's coming up because like we need to integrate it. This is what we're being called to, every person on the planet. We are moving forward. We're evolving, and we have to be integral in our approach. We can't push other people away. We can't push aspects of ourselves away. We have to learn to meet ourselves and others where we are.
Yeah. And I think we've thrown a lot of like what this podcast is going to, what we hope it's going to be and what we hope it's going to provide for everybody. But damn, I'm excited about it.
Yeah, it's exciting and different. And I look around and I see some of it in the podcast world right now. And I think the world is getting ready for the stuff that we have to say and the things that the people we have coming on, in the way that they can help people back to themselves. And it's not about just like selling stuff, right? Like Natalie and I have talked about this, that like when we make a podcast, there might be a week or 2 or 3, maybe 4 between. That is our invitation to everyone listening to like literally do the work. We don't believe in just producing things to produce them to be consumed.
No.
And I know how easy and appealing that is in today's virtual economy, the way that it's all laid out like that.
Mm.
We're not going to say it if we don't think it's important.
Yeah.
And we're not going to spin our wheels just to make something for somebody to, get through for their Monday.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think, yeah, we have so much sense. I think the first, listening in, tuning in, if you're hearing us speak right now, like the first couple episodes will be Alex and I diving into some really beautiful topics that we've kind of got on paper that we want to dive into. And then as we go, we're going to be inviting guests, and it's, we're so excited that you're listening right now and here on this journey, and it feels really exciting. And I feel like this is such a privilege to do, just to like connect with you, Alex, but also provide this container for people, because I want this container to feel safe and sacred and loving, but also like super fun and super light and
safe container, but also like maybe a polite kick in the ass when you need it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Everyone is beautiful and amazing, and also, you poop like the rest of us.
Exactly. So, so I guess we've got our first podcast recording kind of complete. Is there anything else we want to say in this first episode?
Do we want to do the fun getting to know each other questions?
Maybe we should do that for our next one.
Okay.
You want to do that?
Sure.
Yeah, let's do it. Okay. So we have a fun episode next. Next episode will be a little bit more of a deep dive into Alex and I and getting to know each other. Because technically, Alex and I have only known each other for 3 years. So we're actually still getting to know each other.
Very much so. We have an idea for a podcast about that to kind of show the listener, like, you have your idea of what you think you know about a person you already know. And I'm always finding out new amazing things that like Natalie's done or can do. And she's going to be continually amazed with how little I can do in that process.
You know so much and you can do so much. It will be, yeah. We think it's so funny because Alex and I think we know each other. Then like I find out that just that you've traveled in like all these different spaces and that you've done like you're an Aikido master. Like what level are you?
Oh no, not a master. Please don't say that.
Well, I don't know.
Aikido is an art that tends to like I've heard some people describe it as like a PhD for martial arts.
Okay.
But it's a weird space, and it gets a bad rap because it can be kind of too flowy and dancing. Like
abstract?
In some ways, especially with like today's like MMA style, where like people are like, we're going to teach you how to break someone's throat immediately. And Aikido is like, how do you have compassion for the person attacking you?
Oh, wow, that's different.
And as far as I know, it is the only style that does that. So
it's funny because these are the little things that I'm still learning about Alex. As all of you listeners are going to be learning about Alex, so am I. But at the same time, we know each other on such a deep level, and maybe in metaphysical, I don't know.
And we definitely do. I think there's this knowingness, there's this comfortability there of like our spirit has each other's kimono looking at each other, like we see each other at its core. And then like you're like too busy looking at your naked spirit, and then you're like, oh, look what's on your kimono. That's cool.
Why'd you choose all the details of like in this human experience that we maybe haven't known each other. Like I'm still learning and getting to know them. Like it's so fun because we're still like surprising each other. So yes.
So no, not a master by any means. Very much a student, but it's one of these styles that like you see people just. It's kind of like in the original Karate Kid where he walks into Cobra Kai's dojo. Like in the martial arts community, that's kind of a fucked up thing to do, of like challenging somebody in their dojo. Yeah. And then like you'll see people just come in and they're like, I'm better than you. And you're like, dude, why are you saying that to our instructor? Like, why are you talking to them like that? And I've seen my instructor. She's the full embodiment of it. She's just like, even her tone and her posture is something that like calms down the tension that person has. And one of my favorite stories is from one of my instructors in Columbus. And teachers, have ways of saying, like, oh, and this guy came in, I fucking kicked his ass and blah, blah, blah. And Aikido's not about that. And this guy came in, got really, really shitty with our instructor. And I wasn't there at that dojo at the time, but his favorite story, you have a few beers with Sensei Mike and he's like, yeah, and the guy came in and was yelling at me and it ended with a hug. We talked.
That's Aikido right there.
Yeah. And it really,
I guess, wouldn't be like the physicality, but more of like the way of life.
So, yeah. And a quick, I can get into it more on another podcast if people are interested, but like the founder was the go-to kill expert for Japan in World War I. So when you say you get a black belt, traditionally speaking, a black belt was you were given a white belt, you were a beginner, and you put so much blood, sweat, and dirt into it that it actually becomes black.
Wow.
And then like grandmasters, like even today you'll see it, like some guys have black belts and their belt is like fringed and you see the white underneath. So they've trained so much that they've beaten the black out of the belt and it turns white again.
What?
Yeah. So in Aikido, you go 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. 0 is Sandan, black belt. Wow. And 0 means like you're officially ready to start training. We've given you the language. You understand the words. Now it's time you're going to start like writing poetry and pieces and things like that.
Cool.
So that's why when you say like first degree, second degree, third degree, those are the degrees away from 0 on that side of the scale.
Wow, that's really embodying kind of like the real, like the energetics of it. That's really cool. And like I can relate a little bit of that, like in studying yoga. I mean, yoga, there's like the physical practice and then there's like the energetic practice. And I mean, it has such a full, all these branches and modalities that are based, and everybody's intro to yoga is through the physical practice, right? But there's just so much depth to it. It sounds like that's kind of what it is.
Well, yeah. And so I didn't want to end on him saying like, oh, it was the go-to kill expert. Like he had 2 spiritual epiphanies. And then by World War II, it changes. And he starts to say like, we need to be able to take care of our attackers. And it's this whole internal work that you have to do that as a fucking sword is coming at you. Like, how are you relaxing? And a lot of it is like posture and alignment and like, where are you putting your tension? Where are you putting your energy?
Right. Where are you putting your thoughts in that moment?
There's a guy and it looks like woo-woo Aikido shit. It's the stuff you see online where you're like, oh my God, that's fake. And I've grabbed the guy and he's got 3 guys my size. I'm 6 foot, 180. He's got 3 of us grabbing him and we're all pushing in towards the center. And he's doing this like internal work where like you just feel like little gears turning. He's not even
energetics. Boom.
Yeah. So he's just doing it. And Kurt met him once, and the two had this like they shook hands and they like transcended time space together.
Wow. I wonder what the transmissions were between them. They probably had like 10 years of conversation in that moment where they solved all the world's issues.
Yeah. So part of my spiritual path is I had this very cool dojo in Liverpool, was my first one that I ever went to. And I had like matrix type moments where I was like out of body.
Love that.
And I was like moving and I didn't know how I was moving. That got me into this. And you're like, oh shit. That was a continuation of the spiritual path I was arguing.
Oh my God. I'm so excited. We have so much to like dive into in our podcast because like I want to keep going and talking about like all these like mystical experiences. But yeah, there's so much that we're going to dive into. And I'm super, super pumped. Alex, I'm so pumped. How about you?
I'm pumped. I'm honored to be with you, to be holding the container with everybody. I'm very, very excited. And I'm just amazed and honored to have you as a partner on this.
I know. Let's do this. Let's do this podcast. So first episode of Huffing Spirit. There you go. You have it. next episode, stay tuned, and we will dive into some other fun, sacred, crazy, funny, hilarious, amazing stuff.
Yeah. I mean, so while we're talking about this, keep in mind, like, with most of my life experiences, I'm fucking bumbling through it and like falling face first. So like, we're going to be talking about spiritual experiences, but just know, like, I was probably making an ass out of myself most of the time in that process. Still am.
Oh yeah. Same. We're going to show like the humbling side of things.
Oh yeah.
Side. Oh, lots of that. But
Spirit
also,
can like smack you with a 2x4 some days when you're not listening.
Yeah, just when you think you've got it all figured out, your ego comes in to tell you that. Spirit's gonna be like, nope, boom, kicks you off that podium.
Or when your ego realizes that there's the small s versus the big S, self, that there's somebody else in the house. You're like, oh, shit.
Yeah, lots of that will definitely happen in this podcast. So, all right, Huffing Spirit, episode 1.
Huffing Spirit.
See you guys next time.
Hasta luego.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Huffing Spirit Podcast. Remember, you are your own teacher. Take what resonates and leave the rest. For more info, follow us on Instagram at Huffing Spirit Podcast and subscribe on Spotify or iTunes. Bye for now.